The commissioning of INS Arighat, India's second indigenous nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine, has bolstered spirits amongst defense analysts and given cause for celebration. It has been inaugurated by Minister of Defense Rajnath Singh as crucial for strategic balance in the region as well as strengthening deterrence, signaling a focus on China. Conveying concern, China's Global Times was quick to lecture India on the responsible use of such platforms. With reports of larger and more long range armed SSBNs expected to be commissioned in the coming years, analysts are pleased with the emerging growth trajectory of India's sea leg of nuclear deterrence. However, it also sharpens the focus on unresolved questions regarding the state of India's overall nuclear deterrence vis a vis China and the role of SSBNs within that framework. For instance, it raises a few questions. Is India's nuclear sea leg meant to bolster deterrence against China, or is it aimed at projecting Indian naval capabilities to deter Chinese naval encroaches in the Indian Ocean region? Or is it simply a signal that India is now part of the big boys club? The acquisition of such niche capabilities should be complemented with a rigorous debate on their optimal uses, hidden risks, and associated costs. Nuclear debates, after all, in the 1980s and 90s prepared India to both erupt as a nuclear power as well as navigate international repercussions with a well articulated strategic rationale and a force structure that conveyed both responsibility as well as stability. In the years after the civil nuclear deal, a second round of debate helped India think through the knotty problem of Pakistan's nuclear blackmail while also considering significant revisions to the nuclear posture in light of China's own rise. If you remember, statements back then by officials and political leaders signaled some form of ambiguity in India's minimalist nuclear doctrine, reflecting new India's strategic assertiveness. At the same time, India's deployment of nuclear capable Sukhoi 30 MKI fighters in Assam between 2009 and 11 signaled to China in very material terms that it could not rule out India's nuclear weapons during a conventional war. Such a posture complemented the then ongoing shift in conventional doctrine from deterrence by denial to one of punishment. However, a survey of published material since 2020 indicates a definite shrinking of this debate, only reinforced by the absence of official calls for revision of the doctrine, something that had been frequent from 2014 to 19. While an explanation of the causes of this decline is beyond the scope of this essay, it is easier to infer that a revival of the nuclear debate in its third form is necessary. This is owing to significant shifts in both bilateral relations with China as well as shifts in the international order. What is also worthy of taking note is the evolving Chinese nuclear thinking. According to Larry Wurtzel, a former US defense attaché in Beijing and an expert on the PLA, Chinese military writings within code place a great emphasis on joint counter nuclear intimidation during informationized joint operations and in situations resembling a crisis with India. The purpose of such contingency planning, according to him, is to actively deter enemy nuclear deterrence and conduct the right level of reasonable and constrained counter nuclear intimidation operations to thwart enemy nuclear blackmail. End quote. Such exercises indicate that Chinese military leaders are resolved to negate the deterrence effects of India's nuclear arsenal. This was on display to a minor extent in 2021 at a time when the People's Republic of China arguably felt the most nervous about possible Indian adventurism at the LSE. According to journalist Adil Brar, during a tense negotiation period in 2021, Chinese state media released two videos that had aspects of nuclear signaling. The videos, quote, reference the military tensions at the border with India and include images of the People's Liberation Army rocket force carrying out preparedness exercise of nuclear capable missiles. Recent developments, such as the ongoing construction of a submarine base known as Project Varsha in the Bay of Bengal, the future induction of K5 longer range missiles, advances in anti submarine warfare capabilities by both India and China, and increasing Chinese oceanographic research for submarine operations in the Indian Ocean region and also close to the Bay of Bengal necessitate careful consideration of future nuclear operational challenges and dilemmas. both within and outside the government. India's development of the sea leg of its nuclear triad is likely to cause concern in Beijing. Whether this concern is a net positive or negative for India will depend entirely on how India tailors its growing capabilities with its overall nuclear and strategic doctrine. The Indian nuclear debate, so closely tied to the Bernard Brodie school of thought, never veered too deep into issues related to nuclear deterrence in the subsurface dimension. Now, nuclear maxims of credible minimum deterrence work so elegantly in the land domain and suit India's political sensibilities, they struggle to maintain relevance at sea. India's strong emphasis on civilian control has led to a three-phase process for mating nuclear weapons with launch tubes and platforms, thereby prioritizing safe usage over operational readiness and survivability. This has arguably resulted in a growing gap in alertness or operational readiness between India and China over the years, marking a crucial factor in any meaningful crisis situation that further incentivizes Chinese quote unquote counter deterrence thinking. Now, instead of the sea leg propelling changes to India's system of command and control, and owing to the very nature of sea based deterrence, India appears to have adopted the land suited system of civilian control on its sea based strategic deterrence as well. Hence, India's SSBNs are unlikely to operate like traditional SSBNs, which are ever ready to launch a nuclear missile from undetectable areas of operation in the wide ocean. Instead, India's strategy is likely to resemble a bastion strategy, something similar to the Soviet approach during the Cold War, whereby the subs hover near peers, waiting weapon mating during the early stages of significant crisis or conflict. Such a posture negates the unique benefits an SSBN promises to a degree, which is an assured retaliatory strike due to its survivability to a first strike. This approach also requires India to achieve reliable sea control in the Bay of Bengal region, including strong ties with neighboring states of Bangladesh and Myanmar, and in order to deny Chinese maritime influence and presence. The growing anxieties about submarine warfare in the wider Indo-Pacific and India's own foray into it, that too with a strong degree of cooperation with regional partners, necessitates analytical investments to think through the opportunities and risks inherent in this new field. Such debates, by touching upon guiding doctrines as well as operational resiliency, are likely to assist decision makers in preparing for a more dangerous world at sea. Now, recent Chinese overreactions, for instance, take the Galwan standoff, to India's force development in a conventional domain have indicated that it is not enough for India to assert the defensive intent underlying some of its offensive oriented capabilities when it comes to China. Delhi might hope that showcasing key assets will generate strategic dividends, but they may not. If anything, underinvestments in these capabilities done in a time insensitive manner could leave India even worse off. In that sense, India's development of its sea based strategic deterrence is both a cause for celebration and a catalyst for strategic assessment. Now, as India seeks to turn the Bay of Bengal region into a bastion for its nuclear subs, China is likely to increase its surveillance and targeting capabilities in that region. And it will do so while enhancing maritime relations with both Bangladesh and Myanmar. Now, as China seeks to exploit even the US's concern over the risk of nuclear escalation for strategic benefit, India must ensure that the common pursuit of non escalation in the nuclear domain during a military crisis remains just that, a common pursuit. And that's it from me. I am Sidharth Raimedhi, a fellow at the Council for Strategic and Defense Research. Thank you for tuning in.